Hi class. So let's discuss digestive hormones. So there's a lot of digestive hormones that regulate digestion. So they can speed up the process time, so they can speed up the transit time. They can inhibit or slow down the transit time. So there's varieties of hormones, and the different hormones, they act on the different organs. So those organs can release a particular chemicals, digestive juices. So that can help to digest products so we can absorb them later. So the first one that I want to discuss is the gastrin. So as the name implies, gastric or gastrin, something that sits in the stomach. So the gastrin is like in the middle of a lot of processes. So the gastrin is released in response to food reaching the stomach. So this is the oral cavity, that's the esophagus, and here's the stomach. So once the food gets into the stomach or further down into a small intestine, right here, the gastrin will be released. So then the gastrin will trigger the release of hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. We discussed pepsinogen, so watch the video on pepsinogen. So it says that it will be released once the food gets into stomach or the small intestine. However, as we discussed in previous classes, that chemicals, hormones released by glands even before we start eating food. So this is kind of a cephalic stage when your thoughts, when you're thinking of food, when you're hungry, so your body already prepares for incoming food, so it starts releasing. I'm salivating just because I'm talking about food and I'm slightly hungry. So that's that state that we're really releasing. We prepare our compartments for the incoming food. So the gastrin is in the middle of all that. So the G cells in the stomach, they release hormone gastrin. So here's the stomach, and the G cells release hormone gastrin. So the gastrin starts acting on different cells to release some other chemicals. So the digestive process is very complex. So it's like one thing acts on another thing. So it's basically one hormone can indirectly lead to increase of digestive process or inhibition of digestive process. So in this case, gastrin acts on parietal cells within the stomach, and parietal cells releases hydrochloric acid. Also, gastrin acts on the chief cells, and the chief cells in response releases pepsinogen. Remember that pepsinogen is inactive enzyme, and then pepsinogen will release pepsin. Pepsin is something that is active enzyme, and that will act on the proteins to start breaking down them into smaller peptides. Also, gastrin acts on the mast cell. So what is the mast cell? So the mast cell is part of the immune system, and the mast cell, when it's been stimulated, it releases chemical histamine. So if we talk about the immunity, the histamine is something that dilates blood vessels. So for example, if the pathogen like virus or the bacteria enters the host, the system, so the immune system will act on the mast cells, and the mast cells will start releasing histamines, and histamines will dilate blood vessels, so it would be easier for the macrophages or the other immune cells to arrive to the injury area where there's an accumulation of pathogens. So the histamines dilate blood vessels. So in this process, kind of similar happens that has nothing to do with pathogens. So the gastrin will act on the mast cells, and mast cells will release the histamines, and histamines will act on something on the parietal cells on one of the receptor, it's H2 receptor, and that will also stimulate production of hydrochloric acid. But you see here something like this. So that's a neuron, and here are the axon terminals, and within those axon terminals, that's where the neurotransmitter will be released. In this case, acetylcholine can also act on the chief cells, so it's a neurotransmitter. Not only the hormone, but also neurotransmitter acts on the chief cells to release pepsinogen to digest proteins. Then also gastrin releasing peptide would be released and act on the G cells, acts as a neurotransmitter, will kind of initiate the entire process, so that GRP, gastrin releasing peptide, will act on the G cells. G cells in response will act on the gastrin, and now gastrin does this double job to make sure to release hydrochloric acid from parietal cells and to release pepsinogen inactive enzyme from the chief cells. Also on this side, acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, will also be acting on the receptors on parietal cells, but in this case it's muscarinic receptors. And the muscarinic receptors are present in the postganglionic neurons in the target organs. So it's basically what is postganglionic. So there's one neuron, there's another neuron, there's a preganglionic, there's a postganglionic neuron. It doesn't really matter in this case. This is anatomy physiology, which has nothing to do with our course, but so you see how many hormones or other chemicals and the neurotransmitters are working together in tandem in order to produce hydrochloric acid so we can start denature protein, and then pepsin so we can actually start breaking down those peptide bonds so we can digest this very complex polypeptide, right? So now we need to denature it by the hydrochloric acid, so it would look like that. It is hypothetical example. So the pepsin now can act on these peptide bonds, so now we can actually release amino acids so we can absorb them. I hope that it was not that complicated. See you in the next video.